My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I fooled my mother. The result? My sister won't inherit a single thing, and before you judge me, let me tell you why she deserved it. You know what they say about family. Blood is thicker than water. What they don't tell you is that sometimes blood can poison everything it touches. I was 7 when I first realized my mother had a favorite. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden behind closed doors or whispered in hallways. No, it was right there, bright as daylight, cruel as winter. My sister Emma got the bigger bedroom, the better toys, the prettier dresses for school pictures. When I asked why, my mother would smile that practiced smile and say the same thing every time. I love you both equally, sweetheart. You're just different, different. That word followed me everywhere. When Emma broke my grandmother's china set, and I got blamed for leaving it where she could reach it. When she failed 3 classes, and I had to give up art lessons to pay for her tutor. When she crashed Dad's car, and I had to sell my college fund to cover the insurance deductible. Different meant disposable. Different meant forgettable. Different meant less. Emma was the golden child, the one with dreams bigger than our small town in Ohio. She was going to be an actress, a model, a writer. She was going to see the world and make something of herself. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who would stay home and take care of things. Nobody asked me if I wanted to dream too. When Emma turned 18, our parents threw her a graduation party that cost more than my entire senior year. 200 guests, a live band, catered food, and a brand new car waiting in the driveway with a giant red bow. When I graduated valedictorian 2 years later, we went to Applebee's, just the 4 of us. Emma spent the entire dinner talking about her upcoming semester at New York University. Rebecca doesn't mind, my mother said when Emma worried about the cost. She understands family sacrifices. I smiled and nodded. I always smiled and nodded. But inside, something was breaking. Something that had been cracking for years finally snapped clean in half. Emma left for New York that fall. She called home twice in the first month, once in the second. And then, silence. My mother cried every night for 3 weeks. She's just busy, she'd say, staring at her phone. She's living her dream. Meanwhile, I was living her nightmare. Dad got sick that winter, pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months. Guess who came home to help? Guess who quit her part-time job to drive him to chemotherapy appointments? Guess who held his hand when he couldn't sleep because the pain was too much? Not Emma. She was in the middle of something important in New York. A showcase, an audition, a networking event. There was always something more important than us. Dad died on a Tuesday in March. The funeral was on Friday. Emma flew in Thursday night, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. She cried beautifully at the service. Everyone commented on how devastated she was, how much she loved her father. I sat in the front row in my old black skirt from high school, watching her performance, and felt something cold settle in my chest. She left Sunday morning, back to her important life. "Thank you for handling everything," she said, hugging me at the airport. "You're so much better at this stuff than I am." This stuff. Like grief was just another chore I was naturally suited for. Mom never recovered from losing Dad. Not really. She tried to put on a brave face, but I could see her shrinking a little more each day. She stopped cooking his favorite meals because it hurt too much. She stopped watching their shows because his chair stayed empty. She stopped talking about the future because she couldn't imagine one without him. I moved back in to take care of her. Quit my job at the insurance company. Gave up my tiny apartment across town. Emma called once a month, sometimes twice if she needed money. "How's Mom doing?" she'd ask, and before I could answer, she'd launch into stories about her latest audition, or her new boyfriend, or the amazing restaurant she'd discovered in Soho. She never asked how I was doing. 3 years passed like this. 3 years of me being the dutiful daughter while Emma played at being an adult in the big city. Mom's memory started slipping when she turned 72. Little things at first. Forgetting where she put her keys. Calling me Emma. Asking when Dad was coming home from work. The doctor said it was early-stage dementia, not unusual for someone her age, especially after losing a spouse. With proper care and medication, she could have several good years left, but proper care costs money, and money was something we didn't have much of. Dad's medical bills had eaten through most of their savings. The house was paid off, but it needed repairs we couldn't afford. The roof leaked, the furnace was dying, the foundation was cracking. I worked 3 part-time jobs trying to keep us afloat. Cleaning houses in the morning, data entry in the afternoon, and stocking shelves at the grocery store at night. Emma sent a Christmas card that year with a photo of her at some fancy party. She looked beautiful and happy and utterly untouchable. "I need to update my will," Mom said one afternoon, completely out of nowhere. We were sitting in the kitchen, sharing a pot of tea and watching snow fall outside the window. She seemed lucid that day, more present than she'd been in weeks. "Your father and I made our wills 20 years ago, when you girls were still in high school. Things are different now." She pulled out a manila folder from the junk drawer. Inside were official-looking documents with curled edges and faded ink. "I want to make sure you're both taken care of," she said, scanning the pages. "Equally." That word hit me like a physical blow. Equally. Even now, even after everything, she still believed in that lie. I helped Mom find a lawyer, a nice woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in elder law. She came to the house because traveling was hard for Mom by then. "The current will splits everything 50-50 between your daughters," Ms. Chen explained, reviewing the documents. "The house, the remaining savings, the life insurance policy, your father's pension benefits. Is that still what you want?" "Of course," Mom said without hesitation. "I love my daughters equally." There was that word again, like a knife twisting in an old wound. Ms. Chen looked at me. "Rebecca, as your mother's primary caregiver, you should know that Ohio law allows for adjustments based on contribution to care. If you've been providing significant support—" "No," Mom interrupted firmly. "Equal shares. That's what their father wanted, and it's what I want too." I smiled and nodded. I always smiled and nodded. But that night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I did the math. The house was worth maybe $200,000 if we were lucky. After repairs, probably closer to $150,000. Mom's savings account had about $30,000 left. The life insurance would pay out $50,000. Dad's pension would end when she died. Split in half, Emma would get roughly $115,000. $115,000 for a woman who hadn't visited in 2 years, who couldn't be bothered to call on Mom's birthday, who didn't even know that Mom sometimes forgot to eat if I wasn't there to remind her. $115,000 for abandoning us. While I would get the same amount, despite sacrificing everything. My career, my social life, my chance at marriage and children, my entire adult life spent caring for people who took it for granted. It wasn't equal at all. It was the cruelest joke imaginable. That's when I decided to level the playing field. I want to be clear about something. I didn't set out to steal Emma's inheritance. I'm not a monster, despite what she probably tells people now. I just wanted fairness. Real fairness. Not the pretty lie my parents had always told themselves. It started small. Mom began asking me to handle more of her paperwork. Bills, insurance claims, medication refills. Her arthritis made writing difficult, and her memory made it confusing. "You're so good at this," she'd say, signing whatever I put in front of her. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I started keeping track of everything I did. Every meal I cooked, every doctor's appointment I drove her to, every middle-of-the-night emergency when she fell or got confused or couldn't breathe properly. 3 years of full-time caregiving. 3 years of my life I could never get back. How much was that worth? What was the dollar value of a daughter's devotion? The opportunity came 6 months later. Mom's condition was getting worse. She'd started having bad days where she didn't recognize me at all. The doctor said we needed to consider assisted living soon. "I want to make sure my affairs are in order," she told me during one of her clearer moments. Before I can't anymore." She asked me to call Ms. Chen, to have her come back to the house, to make sure everything was properly documented. but Ms. Chen was booked solid for the next month, and Mom was having fewer and fewer good days. What if I found someone else? I suggested. Just to review the documents and make sure they're still valid? We could always have Ms. Chen make changes later if needed. Mom agreed. She trusted me completely. So I found someone else, a lawyer named David Hoffman, who worked out of a strip mall office and charged half of Ms. Chen's rates. He looked exactly like what you'd expect from a discount attorney. Rumpled suit, coffee stains on his tie, and the kind of desperation that comes from too many failed cases and overdue bills. Perfect for what I needed. I met with Mr. Hoffman alone first. Told him my mother wanted to review her will but was suffering from dementia. That she sometimes got confused about dates and names but was still legally competent to make decisions. The current will splits everything equally between my sister and me, I explained, but my sister has been absent for several years. She lives in New York and rarely visits. I've been my mother's primary caregiver, essentially sacrificing my own life to take care of her. Mr. Hoffman nodded sympathetically. He'd seen cases like this before. Your mother has the right to change her will to reflect current circumstances, he said, especially if one child has been providing significantly more support than the other. What would that look like? Well, we could restructure it so that the primary caregiver receives the house and a larger portion of the estate. The other child would still receive something, but proportional to their level of involvement. How much? Ohio law requires that children receive something, unless they're explicitly disinherited for cause. But something could be as little as $1, or a small percentage. Say 5 to 10% of the total estate. 5 to 10%. That would leave Emma with maybe $10,000 instead of over $100,000. It seemed proportional. I brought Mr. Hoffman to the house the following week, on one of Mom's bad days. She was confused when he arrived, asking why we needed a lawyer and whether Dad was in some kind of trouble. I gently reminded her that Dad had passed away, that we were just updating her paperwork to make sure everything was in order. I don't remember calling a lawyer, she said, looking between us with frightened eyes. You asked me to handle it, I said softly. Remember? Last week you said you wanted to make sure your affairs were in order before things got worse. She nodded slowly, though I could see she didn't really remember. Mr. Hoffman was professional, but efficient. He reviewed the existing will with us, explaining each section in simple terms. When he got to the inheritance clause, he paused. Mrs. Martinez, this will split your estate equally between your two daughters. Is that still your intention? Mom looked at me, then back at him. Yes, I think so. Equal shares. I want to make sure you understand what that means, Mr. Hoffman continued. Your daughter Rebecca has been your primary caregiver for several years, while your other daughter lives out of state and visits rarely. Some people in your situation choose to acknowledge that difference in their estate planning. I don't understand, Mom said, her voice small and lost. This was the moment that would change everything. I could have stopped it. I could have told Mr. Hoffman that Mom wasn't having a good day, that we should reschedule. I could have called Miss Chen and waited for an appointment with someone Mom actually chose. Instead, I held my mother's hand and looked into her confused, trusting eyes. What Mr. Hoffman is saying, Mom, is that you can choose to give more to the daughter who's been taking care of you. It's legal and it's fair. Emma has her own life in New York. She doesn't need this house or Dad's pension. But I've given up everything to be here with you. Mom blinked slowly, processing. You have been taking care of me, she said finally. Emma is busy with her career. That's right, Mom. So if you want to make sure I'm taken care of after you're gone, you can do that. You can leave Emma a small inheritance and give me the house and the rest. That way, I'll have somewhere to live and some security after spending all these years caring for you. I wasn't lying. Not exactly. I had been taking care of her. Emma was busy with her career. It was fair for me to have security after years of sacrifice. I was just helping Mom see the situation clearly. The new will left Emma $5,000 and a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to our grandmother. Everything else came to me. The house, the savings, the life insurance. Dad's remaining pension benefits, about 95% of the estate. Mom signed the papers with a shaky hand, and Mr. Hoffman had his secretary notarize them immediately, everything legal and binding. There, I said, kissing Mom's forehead. Now you don't have to worry about anything. She smiled at me with such trust, such love, that I almost felt guilty. Almost. Mom died 18 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning in October. I was holding her hand when it happened. She'd been unconscious for 3 days, and the hospice nurse said it would be soon. I'd called Emma, left voicemails, sent texts, told her that if she wanted to say goodbye, she needed to come now. She was in the middle of booking a commercial, she texted back. Something about a yogurt ad that could be her big break. She'd fly home as soon as she could, but Mom couldn't wait for Emma's schedule. She passed peacefully, and I was the only one there to witness it. The only one who heard her last breath, who felt her hand go still in mine. I cried for her. I genuinely grieved. Despite everything, I had loved my mother. I'd spent years taking care of her, and losing her felt like losing a piece of myself. But underneath the grief was something else, something that felt suspiciously like relief. Emma arrived 2 days later, just in time for the funeral arrangements. She looked older than I remembered, thinner. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her designer clothes couldn't quite hide the fact that she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here," she said, hugging me at the funeral home. "I tried to get here sooner, but—" "It's okay," I said. And I meant it. I'd expected nothing from her, and she delivered exactly that. The funeral was small. Mom hadn't had many friends left, and most of our extended family lived too far away to travel. Emma gave a beautiful eulogy about our loving mother and the lessons she'd taught us about family and sacrifice. She was still a good performer, I'll give her that. The reading of the will happened the following Monday. Mr. Hoffman had retired, so his partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Walsh, handled the estate. Emma and I sat in her office while she reviewed the documents. "This is fairly straightforward," Ms. Walsh said. "The bulk of the estate goes to Rebecca Martinez as the primary beneficiary. Emma Martinez receives a smaller bequest of $5,000 and several items of jewelry." Emma blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Ms. Walsh repeated the terms of the will, reading directly from the document. Emma turned to me, her face pale. "There has to be a mistake. Mom always said she'd split everything equally between us." "That was the old will," I said calmly. "Mom updated it about 1.5 years ago, after Dad died and after circumstances changed." "What circumstances?" Emma's voice was rising. "What are you talking about?" "You haven't been here, Emma, for years. I've been taking care of Mom by myself while you've been in New York chasing your dreams. Mom decided she wanted to acknowledge that." Emma stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You did this." "I didn't do anything except take care of our mother when you couldn't be bothered." "That's not—" "I was trying to build a career. I was going to bring her to New York once I got established. I was going to take care of her too." "When?" "When were you going to do that, Emma? She's dead now. She died alone except for me because you were too busy with a yogurt commercial to say goodbye." The words hung in the air between us like poison. Emma tried to contest the will, of course. She hired a lawyer from New York, some hotshot who specialized in estate disputes. They claimed that Mom had been mentally incompetent when she signed the new will, that I had exerted undue influence, that the changes were so dramatic they couldn't possibly reflect her true intentions. It was a good strategy. It might have even worked if Mom had been completely out of her mind when she signed the papers. But Mr. Hoffman had been careful. He documented Mom's mental state, had her evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist who confirmed she was still capable of making legal decisions despite her early-stage dementia. He'd followed every protocol, dotted every I, crossed every T. The will stood. Emma's lawyer bills ate up most of her $5,000 inheritance. She ended up with about $2,000 in our grandmother's pearl necklace. I got everything else. The house needed work, but it was mine. I fixed the roof, replaced the furnace, had the foundation repaired, used Mom's life insurance money to make it beautiful again. Emma came by once, about 6 months after the legal battle ended. She looked tired and defeated. The acting career hadn't panned out, and she was working as a waitress in Queens, sharing a studio apartment with 2 roommates. "I just want to understand," she said, standing on the porch where we used to play as children. "How could you do this to me?" "To us?" "I didn't do anything to you," I replied. "I simply stopped letting you take advantage of me. Of us." "Take advantage? Emma, I was building a life. I was trying to make something of myself." "At whose expense?" "While you were building a life, I was living Mom and Dad's death. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of their decline. You got to pursue your dreams while I held our family together. I would have come back if you'd asked me to. I shouldn't have had to ask. You should have wanted to be here." Emma started crying then. Not the beautiful, performative tears she'd shed at the funeral, but ugly, desperate sobs. "She was my mother too," she whispered. "Then you should have acted like it." That was 2 years ago. Emma moved back to Ohio last spring. She couldn't afford New York anymore, and there was nothing left for her there anyway. She rents a small apartment downtown, works at the same insurance company where I used to work. Sometimes I see her at the grocery store or the bank. We nod politely if we make eye contact, but we don't speak. She looks older now, sadder. The dreams that used to make her eyes shine have been replaced by something dimmer, more resigned. People in town whisper about us sometimes, about the Martinez sisters who don't talk anymore, about the inheritance dispute that tore apart a grieving family. They don't know the whole story, of course. They don't know about the years of neglect, the one-sided sacrifices, the pretty lies our parents told themselves about loving us equally. They just see 2 sisters who can't forgive each other. Do I feel guilty about what I did? That's the question everyone wants answered, isn't it? The question that would make this story neat and tidy, with a clear moral lesson. The truth is more complicated than that. I feel guilty about the deception, about taking advantage of Mom's confusion, about manipulating a vulnerable old woman when she was at her weakest. But I don't feel guilty about the outcome. Emma lost an inheritance she never earned. She lost money she never worked for, from parents she barely visited, for a house she never maintained. I gained security after years of sacrifice. I gained a future after giving up my present. I gained something that was always mine in every way that mattered. Is that justice? Is that fairness? I think it's the closest thing to either that I was ever going to get. Emma sent me a Christmas card this year, the first contact we've had since that day on the porch. Inside, she'd written a simple message: "I forgive you, and I'm sorry." I stared at that card for a long time, sitting in the kitchen where Mom and I used to share our afternoon tea. The kitchen that Emma never sat in during those final years. The kitchen in the house she thinks should have been half hers. I thought about writing back, about picking up the phone and calling her, about trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with the only family I have left. But then I remembered all those years of being invisible. All those nights I spent alone while she lived her glamorous life in the city. All those times I smiled and nodded while our parents explained away her absence and my presence. She says she forgives me, as if I need her forgiveness for claiming what was always mine, as if her approval has ever mattered to me, as if she has any right to judge the choices I made while she was busy being somewhere else. I threw the card away, but I kept the return address, just in case she ever wants to visit the house where we grew up, the house where I cared for our parents while she chased her dreams, the house that's mine now, fair and square. She'll have to knock first, of course. After all, it's not her home anymore. It never really was. So yes, I fooled my mother. I manipulated a confused old woman into changing her will. I stole my sister's inheritance and destroyed our relationship in the process. And I'd do it all again. Because sometimes being good gets you nothing but an empty room and a broken heart. Sometimes being the responsible one just means everyone else gets to be irresponsible. Sometimes playing fair in an unfair game just makes you the biggest fool of all. Emma learned that lesson too late. But she learned it, and maybe that's worth more than any inheritance. Maybe that's the real gift I gave her. The gift of understanding that in this world, blood might be thicker than water, but money is thicker than both.